was just thinking while Rabbi Muskin was speaking about this obligation that we have. The obligation that we have to feel as if we were free. To feel that we were enslaved and we came out, even with a lot of the things that we've spoken about already today and the other things that we read, it's still very difficult. Even with the prompts, even with the tools, the eating, even with the amazing Haggadahs that you can get now with the graphic illustrations and really discussing, it's very, very difficult. Who can say that they truly feel like when they leave the Seder table that they just came out of Mitzrayim? It's very, very hard. It's very, very difficult. I'd like to share with you one last idea. It was recorded in Shiurei Das by the Rabbi Bloch, the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva. And he asked the question. He says, if he was designing a Seder, and he would have to deal with this question, this obligation for people to feel like they were free, he suggests that he's not sure the Haggadah would necessarily be the way that he would do. What would he say? So he was writing, unfortunately, he perished in the Holocaust. He's writing already maybe in the early 20th century. And he suggests if he was going to design an evening so that people should feel like they were free, he would send everyone off to the playhouse, to the theatre. Right? How do you say it differently? Right? To the theatre. And what they would do is he'd design the most amazing show. He'd get the best actors, the best script writers, and he would make this incredible show so that people would watch. People would have their heartstrings pulled. They'd feel emotionally connected to the story. They'd be crying, they'd be laughing, they'd be feeling. We know what it's like when you go to an amazing movie. I guess nowadays, if he was writing, he'd say he'd make a 4D IMAX experience with wind blowing and drops of rain falling from the ceiling. And he says, then you'd really feel it. Then you'd really feel it. There's a rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Leff, who takes the idea one step further, and he says, well, if he was designing a Seder, maybe you'd invite 30 or 40 people to your Seder, and you'd split them into two teams, and you'd send 20 out into the garden where there's a huge sandbox, and you tell them to start building pyramids and building sandcastles. And then the other 20 people, you'd give some plastic whips and whatever, and you'd say, you go make sure they make the best castles that you could possibly make. And then in 20 minutes, he'd come out with a whistle, he'd blow the whistle, and he'd free the people in the sandbox. And then they'd really feel free. And then he'd make them swap, and the other people get a turn. Then you'd really feel free. So how can we understand that the way that, obviously, they didn't make a mistake when they wrote the Haggadah. When the Torah said we have to eat matzah, maror, korban pesach, how is it that we can understand that this is supposed to make us feel like we just came out of Mitzrayim? So there's two different dimensions. Rabbi Muskin just spoke beautifully about the dimension that we can comprehend, the dimension that we can understand, the memory, the story, those external things that can get us to feel. But there's another dimension that we're not so in tune with. That's the spiritual dimension. That's the neshama dimension. And we're told that there are certain ways to connect to our neshama. There are certain ways. Eating matzah, eating maror, and eating the korban pesach. How does it work? I don't really know. But also, how does my screen project what's coming from my DVD player when I plug in my HDMI? I don't know how that works. Maybe one of you can explain it to me. But I know if I plug it in, I'll be able to watch my DVD. I don't know how it works. But Mr. HDMI, who designed the cable, taught me. If you put the HDMI the wrong way around, it's not going to work. If your child accidentally, of course, runs his tricycle over the end of your HDMI cable so that it's all smushed and squashed and it doesn't go in properly, then it's not going to work. It has to be the exact HDMI cable, the way the HDMI cable was designed. It has to go in the right port. You can't put an HDMI cable in a Firewire port or in a USB port. It has to be in an HDMI port. And that's the only way it's going to work. And somehow, miraculously, the picture gets projected onto the screen. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed the system, he designed a neshama and a guf, a body and a soul. He designed a system where the Jewish people would have to be enslaved, they'd go through some horrendous times, and then they would be freed. He designed a system where if you want to feel like you came out, if you want to feel free, you have to plug in. You have to plug yourself in. How do you do that? By eating a kazayas of matzah, by eating a kazayas of maror, by eating the korban pesach when we had the Beis Hamikdash. That's how you plug it in. How does it work? I'm not necessarily 100% sure, but my neshama sure feels it, even if I don't feel it. Anyone's ever had a flat car battery? Your car doesn't start. You open up the hood, right? Not the bottom. The hood. You open up the hood, you look at your battery. It looks exactly the same as it did yesterday. Doesn't look any different, but it's not working. You call your friend or AAA and they jump start you. Suddenly it works. Does the battery look any different? You can't, it doesn't glow, right? If your battery glows, it's not good, right? You can't, it doesn't get hot. Maybe a little hot. It doesn't glow, it doesn't look any different. So the same thing, we might not look different when we eat the matzah, we might not look different when we eat the maror. There's something inside. We're plugging in to the spiritual energy of the 15th of Nisan. We don't commemorate days in the Jewish calendar. We don't do something just because something happened on that day. It's because that day has an energy. That day has a spiritual energy about it, and the 15th of Nisan is the day of Yetzias Mitzrayim, a day of freedom. And if we want to plug our neshama on a level that maybe we can feel, I'm not judging anyone, maybe you're very, very highly in tune with your neshama. I'm less so. But I know that my neshama is projecting that feeling of freedom when I follow the rules and I plug the right cable into the right port. By eating my matzah, by eating my maror in the correct way, then on some level, even if I don't feel it physically, I trust that inside I'm feeling incredibly, incredibly free and connecting with generations and generations and generations of Jewish people who have also had that same connection on Leil Seder. This is my concluding idea. I wish that all of you should have a wonderful Pesach, a wonderful Sedarim, and please God, we should all connect, and please God, we should all truly be free as we are supposed to feel. I hand over to Rabbi Mas.
I just want to finish.